Have you ever really thought about the single most important manufacturing process on planet Earth? I mean, it's not happening in some giant factory. It's happening all around us, right now, in every single green leaf. We are talking about photosynthesis, the original and, honestly, the ultimate solar power technology.
So what is it really? Well, think of it like a recipe. A plant grabs some carbon dioxide out of the air, pulls up water from the ground, and then uses sunlight as the oven to cook it all up. The result? Glucose, which is sugar, plant food. And maybe the most important byproduct for us, the oxygen we are breathing right now. This one process didn't just power plants. It literally terraformed our planet, making life like ours even possible.
Okay, to really wrap our heads around how this works, we need to take a tour of the factory. We're going to zoom way in, from a leaf you can see with your own eyes, all the way down to the microscopic machinery that makes it all tick.
Our tour begins right at the factory gates. This surface of a leaf is covered in these tiny little pores called stomata. You can think of them as the loading docks for the factory, opening and closing to bring in the number one raw material they need, carbon dioxide, straight from the atmosphere. Okay, once that CO2 gets inside, we go deeper onto the main factory floor. These are the mesophyll cells. And inside these cells, that's where you find the real engines of this whole operation, tiny green powerhouses called chloroplasts. This is where the magic really happens. And, you know, seeing these little green engines brings up a super fundamental question. We all know plants are green, but why? I mean, that color isn't an accident. It's actually a direct clue to how they get their job done. The answer is all about a special pigment inside the chloroplasts called chlorophyll. Now, this stuff is an absolute genius at absorbing light energy from the blue and red parts of the spectrum. But green light? Not so much. It's not very good at absorbing it. So what does it do instead? It reflects it. And that reflected green light is what hits our eyes, making plants look green to us. So, the whole shebang inside the chloroplast can be broken down into two main stages, kind of like a play, in two acts. Act 1, the light reactions, is all about grabbing that sunlight and converting it into chemical fuel. Then, Act 2, the Calvin cycle, takes that fuel and uses it to build the final product, sugar. Two totally separate stages, but they work together for one single purpose. All right, let's focus on Act 1 for a minute. This is the part of the assembly line that's all about capturing raw sunlight and turning it into specific, usable little packets of energy that are needed to run the rest of the factory. So yeah, as the name suggests, this stage is 100% dependent on light. Inside the chloroplasts, these special structures work like tiny solar panels, soaking up photons. They use that energy to do two absolutely critical things. First, they rip water molecules apart, which is what releases oxygen. And second, they store that captured solar energy in two special molecules, ATP and NADPH. Just think of these as the factory's rechargeable batteries, now fully juiced up and ready to power Act 2. Okay, the factory's batteries are charged. Now we can get to the main event, actually building something. Let's take a look at Act 2, the part where the sugar gets made. This whole process is called the Calvin cycle, and what's cool is it doesn't need light directly. It's this brilliant self-sustaining loop. First, this super important enzyme called rubisco grabs a CO2 molecule. Then the cycle caches in the energy from those ATP and NADPH batteries we just charged to turn that CO2 into a simple sugar. And finally, the cycle resets itself so it's ready to go again. It's just incredible. But get this, it's not a one-and-done kind of thing. To make just one stable molecule of glucose, the plant's food, this entire cycle has to spin 6 separate times, grabbing 6 different molecules of CO2. It is a remarkably precise and energy-hungry process. But, you know, this elegant factory has a potential problem, a glitch in the system. What happens when conditions are less than perfect, like on a really hot, dry day? Well, as it turns out, evolution has cooked up some unbelievably clever workarounds. The problem is this thing called photorespiration. See, on a hot day, a plant closes its pores to stop itself from drying out. Smart move, right? But this causes oxygen to build up inside the leaf. And that key enzyme, rubisco, it sometimes gets confused and grabs an oxygen molecule by mistake instead of a CO2. When that happens, the whole assembly line just grinds to a halt. It wastes precious energy and produces zero sugar. It's a really big deal. So to get around this, evolution came up with two brilliant upgrades. C4 plants like corn use a space solution. They shuttle the CO2 into special, deeper cells, physically keeping it away from the oxygen. Then you have cam plants like cacti, which use a time solution. They basically work the night shift, opening their pores and collecting all their CO2 when it's cool, then storing it to use during the daytime. Two totally different but equally clever fixes for the exact same problem.
And if you think about that CAM strategy, it really gets to the heart of the constant trade-offs plants have to make. A cactus slams its pores shut during the blistering heat of the day for one very simple reason: to avoid losing a single drop of precious water. It's all about survival, prioritizing water over making food 24/7. So now that we've seen the intricate machinery up close, let's zoom back out, because no matter how efficient this factory is on the inside, its total output can be capped by things on the outside. So what causes the bottlenecks? Well, first step is light. More light equals more power, so the factory speeds up. But eventually, all the machinery is working at 100% capacity. It's maxed out. After that point, you can shine all the light you want on it, but it won't do a thing. The assembly line just can't physically go any faster. And it's the exact same story for carbon dioxide. If you give the plant more of its key raw material, yeah, production will speed up. But just like with light, there's a hard limit. Once all the enzymes are busy grabbing CO2, adding more into the air won't help. The workers are all occupied. And finally, there's temperature. Photosynthesis is basically a bunch of chemical reactions run by enzymes, and those enzymes are picky. They have a sweet spot and optimal temperature range. If it's too cold, they get sluggish. If it gets too hot, they can actually break down and stop working. The factory needs that just right Goldilocks environment to run at its best. All of this brings us to one fundamental rule in biology, the law of limiting factors. It simply means that no matter how much light or water you have, if carbon dioxide is the thing in shortest supply, then that's what's going to set the speed limit for the entire process. It's always the one resource you have the least of that holds everything back. Which really leaves us with a final thought to chew on. This incredibly elegant, self-repairing, super efficient system for turning sunlight into fuel has been perfected by nature over hundreds of millions of years. So as we humans scramble to engineer our own sustainable energy solutions, you have to wonder, what other secrets is the humble green leaf still waiting to teach us?